You're better.
See where minds collide and new worlds be. Veritas Automata, the truth in machine, shaping reality in every routine.
So I told everyone last week we felt that the guys over at Clusterfunk had laid down a little bit of a gauntlet. We need to work on a theme song.
That was pretty cool, though. I was surprised.
Okay, so let's finish the debate we started in Slack.
All
Is
right.
it Devo or is it My Chemical Romance?
I still lean towards My Chemical Romance. I don't know why.
Have you ever listened to Devo?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
Maybe that's why.
We're gonna have to work on your music history, or
Okay.
at least get you involved in Weird Al.
All right. Okay.
So if you hear his stuff, you'll recognize it. Devo's very distinctive. Mark Mothersbaugh has gone to a whole bunch of other music production credits on like theme songs for movies and shows and all that. So
Nice.
important piece of musical history.
All right. I'll get myself up to date.
Cool. So I think today we had a couple of interesting papers because we spent a lot of time talking about hallucination. And there's a new paper from Thinking Machines and from OpenAI about their suspected reasons on why hallucination occurs or how to prevent hallucination.
Yeah. So I like the paper from OpenAI. Kind of went on into pretty interesting facts around how they're training the model. So the reward function, like, the reason why most of the LLM per the paper is that, it's not a binary classification. Do you have a right answer or not, but more like guessing. They rewards the guessing or kind of approximately getting to an answer rather than is this correct or not. So that reward function is already built into it. It's not rewarded for saying I don't know, and that's where
So I realized I forgot something. I'm Ben Savage. This is Saurabh, and welcome to the Veritas Automata deep dive because we started diving deep right away.
Right.
No, I think you're right. To continue your chain of thought, that they were talking about it doesn't reward I don't know, but I think there was, I'll call it a very academic assumption in the paper, which is you can train every piece of data to be factual or not in a model.
Yeah. So I think they say that even if you make your data very, very clean and factual, but the distribution of an answer is also matter, right? How statistically valid that is. For example, you ask how many, I think that was from the paper, how many Ds are in DeepSeek, right? And then it kind of like doesn't know because it's trying to pull it from how many times is that the T appears in tokens and all that stuff. So,
and they made an interesting point there on how the model works based on the way the tokenization strategy can be. That can impact it's the outputting of that answer, not the training of it in that scenario.
Yeah, and they also went on to say that even after you have fine tuning on top of it, human reinforcement learning on top of it, but still that underlying reward function is fundamentally very different than so it kind of leads to hallucination down the line. So that was a very interesting read that you can't really pull hallucination out of it. So.
Well, and I think the other piece that they talk about that's another theme through that paper is it's kind of one of the debates that go on in education of humans. And you and I have talked about sometimes the perspective of training a model is like raising a child or vice versa. Maybe don't tell that to your significant partners if you're raising children and you're in the AI space. But I think one of their points was that because they're not rewarding I don't know, and they're putting it on these very structured tests, where the incentive is to guess because you might get the answer right, like multiple choice. Not that any of us ever guessed on multiple choice. That's one of the challenges too, is some of the testing criteria and how they do this, and I think it doesn't mean it's mutually exclusive, but I think I still worry about that fundamental piece that they're making the assumption you can validate every piece of data because there are a lot of facts. I'm not going to call them necessarily subjective, but there is, whether you want to call it perception or probability, you've got to put in because not everyone assumes it the same way. Though it's because of culture, because of education, because of other things. Asking two people what the same color is can be very subjective.
Yeah, I think there was this dress, right? The internet was divided on what color it is, right?
What was it? Blue or black, blue or white, or gold, or something.
Yeah, something like that. I saw it gold, but others saw it a different color. So, goes back to the whole problem of perception, right? So, the world is not 0 and 1. It's not a classification problem. It's more of a regression problem, and everybody's cost function for the regression is different, right? So how do you curate a data set that I'm 30% sure this is the answer, 70% not, and how do you even come up with that kind of a threshold? It's it's a hard problem to solve at that point.
No, I think you're right. I think the other thing too is because they were using these large data sets and varied data sets, because what they wanted to do is get the pattern of language. And so that I don't think you can do, because language by its nature is subjective, right? It's the whole reason why we create programming languages, because they are less subjective than English or whatever someone's native language is. That, A equals B becomes a fact. That's very descriptive and prescriptive on how you go do it. So I think that's one of the challenges of how do you take what they've talked about there and apply it into the real world. I think some of what they argue, one of the early arguments was that if you had a very trained model and you also only use tools to do math, it's like, well, why don't we use a tool when you ask it a math question? Why is it trying to do it, extract it from the language?
So it's probably they're trying to figure out if it learned the logic itself, rather than using a tool, trying to understand if you know the logic, then you can come up with a novel logic of solving a problem that cannot be solved with a tool kind of a setup, right? So it's more of a kind of a chicken and egg problem kind of with the LLMs today, right? But the thinking machine paper that you forwarded earlier was a very interesting take on it. What I kind of found out was that they were saying that, hey, even if you make the temperature, this is prior to GPT-5 when they expose the temperature or any of the other LLMs, right? So it's not doing, not kind of doing a probabilistic dice roll, kind of taking within a distribution of next token, pick the one and highest. Even then, it kind of drifted. The answer changed.
Well, and to be clear, when you say the temperature was, let's call it the amount of randomness.
Correct. Or exploration, you may call it.
We'll use the term, the amount of creativity the model might have.
Yes.
So when you adjusted the temperature, if you set it to 5, it was highly creative. And if you set it to 0, it was supposed to be not creative at all.
Correct. And, basically it was still doing sampling and it was doing a probabilistic distribution of what the next token is going to be. And it was picking the, do it. But even then they found the variation in answer and they were kind of attributing that to how we are using GPUs and parallel processing a lot of it. Some of the maths get done before the other.
Well, it was a combination of how they dealt with parallelism and the fact they were using floating point math.
Correct. Yeah, the rounding and all that.
Yeah, and the rounding.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the problems even really good developers don't always think about. So I think that was a very interesting point they brought up. And even when we were building our server, I saw some research that was saying if you were going to be training a model and you're training it using a system that is not using error correcting RAM, you can have, just different environmental activity can make little changes in the memory that don't fully change the output, but they change it enough that it may not behave the same. If you use the same data training set, the same model and all that, just error correcting. So that makes sense about the floating point, right? If you're not preserving the data accuracy. Because I think in this paper, what they were saying is that depending on the batch size and the token structure, for lack of a better term, it was using different levels of floating point values. So it might use 3 decimals or it might use 10 decimals to be able to go figure something out. And when you did that, you lose fidelity if you go chop from 10 to 3.
Right.
And that creates a problem because where did the missing information go?
And the other thing they said was around batching, like because you take a batch of the training data and then train on it, right? How you batch, that's pretty much random, right? And those impact.
And when we talk about batching is if you've got a document that's 1,000 pages long, you don't drop all 1,000 pages immediately into it. You're breaking this up. So remember, I think we've talked about this in the past, but token is not even a word, right? It's a set of characters or think about it almost like, what's the word I'm trying to make?
It's a symbolic meaning. Something carries a meaning. It could be a group of words, could be a part of the word, could be anything, right? So,
but you're training that. You're kind of training the probability. Those words are all related to each other. That's one batch. And then as you go break that document up, you're breaking up into lots and lots of those.
Correct. So you training, you would typically not feed in 100 million records, but batch them in smaller chunks and then train on them and collect the weights and the corrections and do that. So one of the things that they mentioned in that paper was like, hey, the batching is causing some of the issues and around that, right? So it was an interesting paper how they are trying to solve this probabilistic model to give more of a deterministic result. So we'll see how that whole
and I think it's not mutually exclusive from what we were talking about the OpenAI paper, and even they pointed out in the Thinking Machines paper that certain things kind of started to fall apart, right? Once you got to like 103, 109 tokens, then you started to see drift. Well, okay, if I can only get however many 100 tokens predictably, how do I get the rest of what I need out?
Right. And even the temperature set to 0, yeah, makes sense. But again, if you're trying to debug a problem, you might want to do the exploration, because a lot of different problems could have the similar symptoms, right? Until you explore, you won't do that. And again, for exploration, you are opening the gates of variations in answers too, right? So,
well, and I think it's one of the problems that people want a tool that's highly creative,
right.
but they also want a tool that's highly predictable. And those, even in human tasks, are kind of mutually exclusive.
Correct. Yeah.
If I want a really tight timeline, I have to reduce I have to increase the constraints the team is working within.
Correct.
To go make sure they're going to go execute something.
Right.
If I want something really creative, then I've got to figure out how do I drive that exploration. And it could be that this is putting my old innovation out on, right? It could be I reduce the tool set that they're working with, or I give them something new and say, hey, we found this new mechanism, or this new computer, or this new display, or this new X or Y.
Right.
What can we do with it? What happens?
Yeah. So we'll see how that whole thing, it's kind of interesting to see this combined with creative is pretty good, but when you are developing code within large language model, how that creativity or exploration, changes the code itself, right? We don't know. So it's going to be interesting to see. And with all of that baked in, one of the things I think both the paper mentioned, system prompt also introduces a lot of noise, because if you ask certain things which they have never seen before, kind of even they have not come across this kind of prompting, then they start to guess way more than something, possible question they have seen before, right? So I think you shared also the another tool on calculator, which we'll probably bring in the next time. So there are a couple of universities who are trying to build a mathematical framework around certainty of the answer, right? How if you run the same question with evidence without they call it open book, closed book, how often they are returning the similar answer or same answer, right? Kind of, and test the
And I
model
think
that
that
way.
keyword is the similar, right? That's the power of a large language model, is you can ask it variations of a question and get the right answer, right? It's why for someone who's a horrible typer like me and misspells things all the time, it actually can do a lot of things that I don't expect. It's like, I misspelled it that badly and understood what my intent was. So you don't want to lock it down too much in some cases, because you remove some of the power of the interface.
Yeah, I think when we were discussing the thinking machine paper, the one question I asked was like, if we set the temperature 0, then literally it becomes a specialist tool. It's not doing a generalism anymore, right? So it's the beauty of the LLM is very generalist model. It generalizes across multiple domains and explodes quite a bit, right? So,
well, and I think we've talked about it a lot in the past, that you may have a large language model that serves as your interface, then you may have specialist tools. And to me, this is that argument very much in favor. Both these papers point me more towards what you and I've discussed as potential architectures, where we're building specialist agents or models for specific answers or groups of answers. So one thing may know finance and know that very well. One thing may know HR and know that very well. And I think the other argument, as we've been talking with some customers recently too, is how does that let us manage the security domains?
Absolutely.
Because now I can go box in and say, only this tool has access to this data. Only these users can go see it. So now, someone might be able to find a way to break out of my main prompt, but they get blocked by the time they get to the next one, because that's another layer of security within the system.
Yeah, I think the architecture we're talking about, how do you see that interfacing with the MCP world today, right? Because MCP, again, you're exposing tool use of external tool use may not be in the system, but because there's a lot of chatter around the security of MCP. How do you see that playing out?
I think MCP is really, really cool from that ability to make it easy for models to go. So you can have people creating MCPs they know are going to work with generally any model framework. I think from what I've seen in a number of the papers I've been reading recently on MCPs, that there's some patterns that and this is with any new technology, that people don't think things through, where there are a lot of those tools that may have access to too much. So it's very easy if someone were to get access to the MCP, they can now do things like maybe they shouldn't, because you're exposing the full aspect of the tool. So let's think about a database, right? In most cases, if I'm building a production tool, I want to make sure that, let's say, my MCP can only read data, because I don't want it writing data, because I don't want someone to be able to create a jailbreak and now all of a sudden they're writing bad data into my system. So I think that's one kind of scenario where they're over permissioned. And that's a really common problem that people, when they build an application, if you're a solo dev or other things, it's easier to do everything as root. As a developer, I don't think either of us can look at each other and say, we've never done that before. So but when it gets into production, you've got to really think about those things. And I think the other thing is a lot of the MCPs don't always have RBAC or some kind of permission structure that they're using to control how they're going to go interact. And I think there's still a third problem, which is if you're accessing a data set with that, not all of those are set up to have like row level or different level security.
Right.
And so none of these are barriers, but these are things you need to go into wide open, eyes wide open when you're using these tools to say, okay, we're going to use this. So how do we have our team go vet and figure this out?
Right. Because I think the MCPs today, what I've seen is mostly consume an API key. For example, if you're using an external service to do something like a website with Travelly or, Perplexity, they have MCPs and you provide API keys, but it doesn't, I haven't seen anything that blocks with a RBAC setup. Like, here's my user ID, here's my key. Now you do something with it and then apply the rules as well on top of it, right? So I think certainly there's a need for a framework. MCP could serve as a tool, and then the LLM decides whether this user even have access to the MCP or not, kind of at that level, right? So
I think it's that. It's going to be orchestration layers. It's going to be other things. And as I've worked, and I think because we use tools a little different way. Like I tend to, like I've said, run most things on my local.
Right.
And so the MCPs I've used there for like Postgres, you can do some limitation because I can have access to a specific schema. Or a specific table within a schema just based on how I create the user.
Right.
But I'm still giving the MCP a username and password.
Right.
So if someone, again, right, what's my chain of risk or my blast radius that some people call it, right? So I go in and now I get into the model. Is there a way for someone to get to the model, to the MCP, to get to tell me what that secret is?
Right.
Because once they have that secret, is there a different way they can go approach it?
Yeah, you describing how you use the MCP for the Postgres kind of makes me like, at what point do you just get rid of the MCP layer and just go in and implement a tool, right? Because you would have much more granular control on, how would you, what SQLs to run and what not, right?
But that's the age-old thing, right? It's the whole reason why JDBC, the Java database connector, which is like what every tool in the world uses to go connect, because it's an easy way to connect to a SQL database. Is it the world's most efficient or best tool? No. Is it a well understood, effective tool that you can plug in that JDBC module into most things and get an easy database connection?
A few years ago, there was a critical bug on Java, right? And then everybody was running to patch it. Was it related to this? Can't remember. But there was like everybody uses it.
You may be talking about the one, it was in a reporting module.
Possibly. But
that was used. But there's every tool. There's no tool that hasn't had some vulnerability that's found at some point in its life cycle.
Right.
The only time the biggest thing is making sure that those CVEs are communicated out and that development teams are paying attention. They patch. I mean, there's been one recently for JavaScript for NPM, right?
Yeah.
Where a maintainer was compromised and like 20 packages were compromised because of that.
Yeah.
Mostly for like crypto stealer kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think same thing happened with Python libraries. So the pip was, they were injecting bad libraries and all that stuff. Well, that on that gloom mode, maybe we switch gears to the other paper we were looking at, which was kind of exciting. The using LLMs to extract business logic, if then that was a very, very interesting paper, something that came out of left field. I didn't even notice that coming.
Yeah, well, it kind of fit with some work that you've been doing and that we've talked about, which is, can you go put a unstructured, or in this case, they were using specifically unstructured data, but I would use the broader term of undocumented or poorly documented data set into a tool and develop some rules to understand what is good or what is bad or what is acceptable, or how is that to create that criteria. And if I remember right, in this paper, what they were doing is they were working actually with images of complex documents, and they were going through and creating the rules on what should be there, but then using a human to augment and validate those.
So I think what excited me in this one application they had is they had rules and procedures and decisions. For example, let's say insurance claims and all of that stuff, right? So if you feed all of the data through the the pipeline which they set up, it was again extract the text out of the PDF, do OCR, and do all of that stuff, and then start to create rules. Why did the outcome was claim denied or accepted? What was the reasoning? And that was not there in the document that if then else statement, right, it was able to extract the rules and produce a set of rules and then have a human validate those. That was kind of fun to see because in enterprise world you have a lot of these dinosaur systems, right? People developed and they moved on and nobody has any good documentation. How do you maintain those systems? How do you come up with what logic's running in, kind of like opening a black box kind of a thing, but it's not LLM level black box, but certainly there are logical stuff, right? So that kind of was interesting to see that paper come through.
No, I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was timely to a couple of customer projects that we're in helping folks with, and there's that age old question of, I have a bunch of data. I need complex rules around it, but how do I go create those? And then how do I know what is good data in my data set versus bad? Because I've got 5 years of data and it's millions of rows of records. Generally, it's probably good, but there's probably some outliers in there somewhere that's happened something.
Yeah, I think with the use case you were referring to had an issue with, it was not missing data. Typically, those, if you have bots there, it will catch them very quickly. Hey, you have an excessive missing. But the data we saw that it was a timing field that was having excessive, very high value, and that value kept on repeating. In a time continuous field, you are supposed to see a lot of variation, and that got tagged, and that was like an outlier which was pushing our stats out very weirdly, right? So we went down the rabbit hole of looking through and setting up a code which does the statistical validation, finds the outlier, and not only that, I think we did like chaining, like what leads to that outlier, what are the conditions when you start to see this outlier come up, right?
Well, and I think that's the important thing, when you're looking at something, it's back to the 5 whys, right? It's ask why 5 times, and by the 5th time you're at the actual answer. The first time, no. Second time, no. Third time you're getting close. Fourth time, maybe. Ask why once more.
This unique application of LLMs in this data cleaning piece, it was kind of interesting to see that because it generalizes well, right? But what I think from my experience is that you also have to context engineer up quite a bit to make them understand what it means and what it really truly represents, right? Kind of a setup, right?
Well, and I think I've seen more and more over the last probably 3 months about the term context engineering. And I think it is important that people understand, right? Because everyone was all hot on prompt engineering, which I honestly think was a lot of hype and isn't the reality that people think. I think context engineering, which is very closely related to prompt engineering, but it's really helping the model understand context on a very specific problem and a specific data set more often than not, is super, super key as you start to look at agentic systems. Because if you just try and build a prompt without building in context, right? Prompt being what I would define as, here's the work I'd like you to do. Whereas if you're working with an MCP and a database, you should be telling it, what are the headers? What does this mean? What do these fields mean? So now when the model's looking at it, it's got some ability to go make some decisions that are going to be grounded. Because otherwise it's going to make assumptions because it doesn't tell you, I don't know. Right? We talked about that at the beginning.
So you bring up a very interesting distinction between context and prompt engineering, right? So prompt, just to add a little bit color to that. For example, a use case would be, hey, write me a SQL code with the database fields X, Y, and Z, right? Prompt would be, hey, write me a SQL code to do this, that, and format that in. So it's like human speak, but the context would be you have to provide the table names and the data structure, and you don't want to dump your entire database architecture. You want to dump a couple of tables which are relevant to that, so it's not getting overloaded. Its context is not getting overloaded, and it's engineered for success kind of thing. You're still giving them, figure that out, but you are focusing their spotlight to a narrow zone. I think that's
and I think that's back to what we were talking about too, about narrowing scope, right? If I have to have a more complex thing, I may have to chain a couple of different agents together with each with a very specific context to be able to go build what I need. Because if I try and make it too broad, there's that chance that somewhere midway through, it's going to lose context. And if you've worked with any of the vibe coding or the AI development tools, or if you've spent enough time with an LLM, you're going to find at some point when you're in a chat or a project, Yeah, it may have a context window of a million tokens, but at some point you're going to find it's focusing on the first half, the last half, the middle half, and it's only paying attention to part of the information that's there. And then you've got to go tap it on the shoulder and go, look over here.
I don't about your experience with vibe coding or Copilot developing. It happened to me often. Is like it's trying to debug something, and then in the end, it's like, let me simplify and just cut out the whole functionality to do this.
I've had it do that. I've had it cut out. I've had it go in circles where it goes, well, here's how I need to go authenticate with this API endpoint. And then it goes and fixes it. And then an hour later, you find yourself back in the same loop with deja vu going, why are you trying to change this to work to this standard? And even though, because it's not checking the references you gave it, it's just doesn't sound like. I had one, so I finally had a tool, maybe we'll demo it next week or next time. But I finally got a vibe coded app to fully work.
All right.
And do what I intended.
Okay.
Except that at one point I was going through the testing and it goes, there are 248 tests that failed. Well, I'm going to move on because it doesn't impact what I was looking at. It's like, wait a minute, there's 248. No. Using the example, it's like a very junior developer. It's like, they accomplished task A, but it's like, did you notice the problem here?
Yeah. So memory would be an issue because even if with $1 million, it's kind of come down to the architecture. You have attention network, right? Where is paying attention kind of thing. I don't know how many different items can LLM keep their attention on and still come up with a holistic answer to it.
I do know it was interesting because this was a tool I was paying for. So I was watching the credits. I'm like, okay, it's doing fine. It's doing fine. It's in the requirements credits and it's doing good. And all of a sudden it has this issue. And now you burn half of your other types of tokens. You're like, wait a minute, you screwed this up and now I'm paying for it?
It's a little bit beyond that. If you have used any of those coding plugins into VS Code or even standalone, and if you plug it into a larger code space with lots of files, lots of data, and it tries to explore everything, as it's running and exploring, it's actually chewing through your tokens, and it's like, really?
Well, that's where I had a friend recommend to me a tool called SuperClaude, which I haven't tried.
Okay.
And then another friend was recommending OpenCode. And those two I want to look at because OpenCode, I believe in particular, will let me use local LLMs in addition to, because ideally what you're using is the local to do, maybe you use the cloud to go do your initial architecture. You're using the local to go.
That would be interesting.
And then when you need debug, then you go back to the cloud, right? So now you're able to manage your token budget.
Yeah. It's very interesting because if you go through YouTube, how people are using it, some are front-end developers are connecting Puppeteer or Microsoft so that it opens up your front end, takes a screenshot, and then passes as a multimodal thing, right? And tried that actually, and it really burned through my API calls because each of the images are in full res, passing it through because they changed the color on a button and they wanted to take a screenshot, and I'm like, really?
On the other hand, what you got to remember is that OpenAI, Claude, Anthropic, all those things, their primary business model is not selling you necessarily the smartest, bestest model. It's selling you the compute, the tokens that you're burning. So if these tools happen to go through some of that, they're not going to be heartbroken. Because their revenue is based on really monetizing that infrastructure. It doesn't mean they're not trying to develop good tools, by the way. It's just you got to understand what their business model is.
I mean, the economic scale, right? If it moves from token to more of a deliverables or milestone, and how fast did you achieve that? Maybe people would be okay with paying even more and not paying for fraction of a cent on a token, right? Age-old problem of
we'll figure that out as we figure out the tools.
Very cool.
So we talked a lot about context as part of this and hallucinations. Have you ever had one of those emails where you look at it and you misread the title and you think it's something much more exciting than it actually is?
Happened to me often.
So the latest example I had was because I'd like to go to music and other venues, and I had a venue send me a thing of their upcoming tickets, and I misread it, and it said Trans-Siberian Orchestra Monster Truck Jam. And I thought this could be really entertaining. I missed. There was a comma. Two separate events.
All right.
But I put the prompt in to ask for what a trailer would be for that into one of the AI tools.
Oh, really? Okay.
What would the Trans-Siberian Monster Truck Orchestra or Monster Truck Jam look like?
All right.
And when I play this here, let's go find it real quick. AI actually delivered pretty well.
Wow. All
I mean,
right.
it's got some of the right vibes. Yeah, that was just the first prompt, a 15-second prompt, but
Yeah.
it's
Hey, that's creative. Monster truck and orchestra. Okay.
it's the beauty of some of these tools, right?
Yeah.
It's where back to, do you want to tune it all the way to 0? Maybe for some things, but other things you want to turn it up to, Spinal Tap 11
Yeah.
and see what happens.
That was fun. Yeah, I mean that's the entertainment probably shift towards more LLM driven because
I think there's going to be some interesting stuff, right? There's a couple of video game models that are trying to make some. So when you think about what some of these worlds are, it could be very interesting. Actually, you remember the book Ender's Game?
Yeah.
There's that book. There's the game, The Giants Game, right? Where
Yes.
the game is kind of evolving as it goes through. Some of that stuff, as you look at some of the most current research, it's not here today, but it's getting close where you could build something like that. Maybe not as creepy as that was.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I think the exploration piece of it is fascinating for sure, right? That's how a lot of the inventions are done. On the other side, again, you want to rein it in, reduce the hallucination, but both are important. Maybe it will fork in the middle and get two different systems of AI. So.
I think you're going to have a lot. I mean, it's just like how many programming languages out there, and people always invent new ones because someone doesn't like the way one works.
Yeah.
So any other closing thoughts?
No, I'm waiting for the time when LLMs invent their own language, which is more statistically valid.
There've been a couple of research things where it's happened, so we probably need to look at those. It's been a while. I remember there were a couple where people got very scared of them.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Cool. So in the next podcast, we're going to have a demo, right? You and I will figure that out so we have something cool to show.
All right, we'll do that.
Cool.
All right.
Well, I thank everyone for joining us. Hopefully this is interesting and informative to everyone. Drop some comments on wherever you're watching this so we can get ideas for future topics we should talk about. So thanks all.
Thanks.